Let me tell you something. I am filled with the Spirit today. This is Spirit-filled. And I was sitting there and I said, you know what, Lord? I finally realized the place of the elders in the church. They're the ones who bring the Spirit and the wisdom and the knowledge. See, because y'all pray all the time and you read the Bible. But when you think about the young ones, we don't teach them right. We don't pray, we just take everything for granted. And as you grow and go through the system of life, sometimes we get lost along the way. Amen. And so that's why our elders are so important. I tell you, this place is so full. I just like to say, thank you, Lord, hallelujah. You hear me? Yes, I am so full. I can't tell you. So I worked for the YMCA for 18 and a half years. And I had left the church when I was 16 years old because all the rituals and the things that happened in the church. But I was at a conference with the YMCA, and there's something happened there. Guess what? I got saved again. And I had this feeling of energy. And you know what? The energy I feel right now is way more than that. So I know that God is in this place. Today we're talking about churches, and they've already told you all the history of churches. But I was asked to come today to talk about historic Freemanstown. If you haven't heard of historic Freemanstown, it was once where they called 4th Ward. It's located in 4th Ward, but actually it's historic Freemanstown. It was once over 100 blocks. But guess what happens when they start seeing progress? We want it back. So Freemanstown was built on the worst property in Houston, the swampy areas. You know, people used to wade through knee-high water to go to church on Sundays. But guess what? They went anyway. People talk about slavery. I don't believe that our people ever were enslaved. Because the only way you can be enslaved is to be enslaved in your mind. I believe that they were all free. The only thing that happened is you took everything away from them, their culture, their religion, everything that connected them. Some people held on to that. And they still practice their religious beliefs, maybe not in a church. We talked about that a lot of people were allowed to go to the white churches and sit in the back. But guess what? There was something called a freedom tree. That after hours, what they would do is gather and have church and practice their religions still. And why do you think that we were able to survive and get this far? It's because of those prayers. You ever heard someone say that prayers are answered from the grave? Because you don't know what your ancestors' prayer was for you. Okay? So prayers are answered for the grave. We're living it right now. I believe in researching and recording history of real people right now. Just because you hold a position or a political office or whatever that may be does not devalue my story. Everyone in here has a story. You see that gray hair on your head? Guess what? You are geniuses because you have lived the life to get to where you are now that many don't get anymore. So I applaud you, and I'm just like, I'm in presence of greatness. They asked me to come speak, but I want to ask you about that lifeline. So never demean your story, and everybody has a story, regardless to how big or anybody think it is. But the only way it can live is if you tell your children about it and you pass it down. Last year they talked about that they were celebrating 400 years of slavery from 1619 to 2019, where the first people came over. Well, I said, you know what, let me check back 8 generations and see how many people it took to make me. When I started searching back, just 8 generations, only 8 generations, it took 240 people to make just me.
All right.
In my DNA. Isn't that amazing? Absolutely amazing. So you don't know what's in you. If you don't, you need to find out, because our children need to know. They need to know that they came from greatness. So Freemanstown is one of those places, those settlements that was settled right after slavery. Most people say after the Civil War, but it was in 1865, right after slavery. And they actually settled first on the banks of the Buffalo Bayou. You know that place that floods every time it rains hard across the road? Well, they were living down in that area. And they migrated over to where Freemanstown is now, to a higher ground to get out of that. Okay? So that's where it started at. So there's some special people that they talk about, Reverend Jack Yates. So one of the things that's very unique about Reverend Jack Yates was a free man. He had all his freedom, but he had a wife named Harriet, and they had 10 kids. And then, so what happened is, the owner wanted to take the family and leave and go to Texas because he wanted to remain a slave owner. Reverend Yates begged them and pleaded with them, could he go? So guess what he did? He re-entered slavery to go with his family. Now that's some family love and some family dedication. Okay? They were down in a place called Pleasure. It's just like that in Matagorda County. And that's where they started at. That's where the slave owner moved the family. And after freedom, they moved to Houston. And when they moved to Houston, they moved on the Buffalo Bayou in a tent. Can you imagine? 10 kids, wife, in a tent? And his big thing was about education. He learned to read from the slave owner's son when he was growing up, simply because his mother took care of the slave owner's son. And so you know how kids do. They teach each other. So that's how you learn how to read. But his thing was about land ownership. He encouraged people to purchase land and to get educated because he knew how to read. That was his big thing. Bishop College, someone mentioned it. He was trying to get that college started. But he supported it, although he wasn't. Houston College was right across the street from College Park Cemetery. That's where a lot of the historical people are today, is in College Park Cemetery, Olivewood, Harrisburg, and Evergreen. Evergreen is in Fifth Ward. That's where a lot of people are, our historical leaders. But my thing is, we cannot allow someone else to decide what our communities look like. We can't decide to let them, make them into cemeteries and say, you know what, this is where we were. Green Pond is a community that Reverend Yates actually he helped establish. But guess what's in Green Pond right now? There's a church left in Green Pond. There's 3 houses left there. The houses have on the sign saying to be moved by cherry movers, so meaning that they're gone. And there's a lot of land that's owned by the church. The church has a for sale sign on it. So guess what happens when those things are gone? That place will be erased except for what? The cemetery with some historical markers. Okay? It's important to teach our kids that you have to learn how to vote. Not just vote, but hold people accountable. They must be held accountable. Too far have we gone and people have not been held accountable. First thing you need to ask yourself, okay, we put you in office, you made a lot of promises. Have you fulfilled those things? Is my life better? Is my family's life better? And the answer to that is no. Get somebody else in there. Simple, it's really simple as that. I like taking pictures. I like spending, I like you. But you have to go in and put in some work. And that's really what it's all about, putting in the work. So there's some other people besides Reverend Jack Yates. There's Reverend Frederick Lights. He was the second pastor of Antioch after. So some people will tell you that Jack Yates was the founding pastor of Antioch, but he was not. He was the first full-time pastor. Antioch was established in 1866. Reverend Yates was ordained in 1868. So that's the big difference between the two, right? But we have to find out correct history so that the story continues the correct way rather than changing narratives. People will change your narrative. If you do not write your story or invest in whatever your story is, you will be written out of it, and the narrative will change. It will make you seem like we did nothing. So in historic Freemanstown, there are several houses that are still down there. Very few people look like us own those houses. Very few. Miss Catherine Roberts, she owns the museum that's down there. So she has 10 properties and 6 structures. Within those, 2 of the structures that she owns were the most wealthiest black men in Houston. All your doctors, lawyers, teachers, anyone of any type of financial means lived in Freemanstown. But guess what happened? 1915, the Red Book, 50 years after slavery. They wrote their progress down, and guess what? Somebody got a hold of it. And after that, that's when I believe that people start gentrification of Freemantown. That's what they call it. Gentrification of Freemantown. After that, after they found out all the progresses that they did. If you've never heard of the Camp Logan riots in 1917, yes. Camp Logan riots, you've heard of that?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
156 soldiers marched on the city of Houston to get police officers that had been brutalizing the community. Okay? They could easily take you out of your home and put you on a farm. Because remember, right after slavery, if you didn't have a job, guess what? They would re-enslave you. Then they came with the 13th Amendment. If you're a convict or you're convicted of anything, you have no rights. That's why they put you back to work. That's why you see they come up with laws. People make laws right now in order to take your land, to keep you in the same places. Everyone has the right to be successful. Let's be fair about it. But it's our responsibility to teach the young. You have the millennials. Everybody talk about the millennials. We have to approach them a certain way, but we taught them that. We taught them how to be that way now. You taught them how to be resilient like that.
Okay.
But they still need to know they don't know everything. They think they do, but they don't know everything. So you have to figure out how to approach those guys and get them to go to work. We got to get them to go to work. So Reverend Ned Pullum, this is my opinion. Reverend Ned Pullum, I believe, was the richest man that lived in Freemantown. Simply because if you look at his house, he has stained glass windows, just as if he was in a church. You can still see it today. J. Vance Lewis was a lawyer. He held J. Vance Court in his house in order to keep black people from going down to the court system downtown. Okay? Now, if you've ever been to the big historical courthouse downtown, if you've ever been inside of it, upstairs is where people of color had to sit. It's beautiful, like it is beautiful, and they have preserved it, but we had to sit upstairs. And they have cases every year that they present for Black History Month about people in Houston. So if you've never gone to see one of those, like Judge Wyman, that's who does it. It is amazing to see, because what they do is go back over the case again and tell you about it. How people have won their freedom because somebody tried to sell them and they took them to court. Black people back in the day was taking them to court. So we have people, and we come from something that's absolutely amazing. And the church is most definitely a part of that. But we've lost a lot in the church too. Okay? We've lost a lot. But I know today, I found something. And I know we haven't lost, because I can feel it. So my thing to you is that you still have to get on those young people. I want everybody to feel what I feel right now. You want everybody to feel that. And that's not often you can go places and you feel it that way. So I commend y'all, and the guys that did skit, that was excellent. That was excellent. So as y'all know, I'm a photographer. So I had the pleasure of photographing a house in Freemantown probably about 3 weeks ago. And this house had been burned. It was owned by an Italian grocer. And they call it a shotgun house. But it's not, the shotgun houses are designed that way because at that time it was the best available technology. That's really the only reason that they call them shotgun houses. Now, there are some houses that were built for rent houses. They're different. Like the houses that Black people built for themselves are different from the houses that other people built for them for rent houses. Rent houses are like slave quarters. I don't know if you've ever been to the South and seen a slave quarter. Yes. But you can go down to Freemantown right now and go to 1500 Victor, and you can see houses that look like slave quarters are still there. Guess what? Nobody that look like us on them either. Somebody just purchased them, a historical realtor just purchased them in order to turn them into different type of housing, to add stuff on them so they can sell them back to someone. It's 10 of them. Very few people still own their homes there. But you know what? It's their home. They want to live their life out and pass it down to their kids. But the way the system is rigged, they won't be able to do it. Only thing, and the other thing is the big thing down there is the brick streets. You know, everybody, if you haven't heard about the brick streets, that information is everywhere. But there's something very significant about the brick streets. It's connected with religion. It's connected with the spirit. They say that's the place that people used to go where it's the connect between our world and the spiritual world. Okay? But the pattern in the big streets, people talk about a lot because that's how they put their culture in the community without people knowing and hid things without people knowing. So I'm from Thomasville, Georgia. The same exact pattern that's in those brick streets are in the brick streets in Freemanstown. Okay? Because you know after slavery, people migrated from places to find their families. Same exact pattern. Now the bricks in Freemanstown are much better than the bricks in Thomasville. Those bricks weigh 8.5 pounds each. They're very thick. And don't let anybody tell you that the bricks can't sustain any. No, you want it. Because if you see the skyline, you know what everybody's after. So I did this book about Freemanstown. It's about Freemanstown churches. It's 150 years. I did it for the 150-year anniversary of Freemanstown, 150 years standing strong. And it's about the history of the churches in historic Freemanstown and the churches that grew out of that community. And that's all over the city now. 5th Ward, Acres Homes, all these other places. But guess where they came from? Freemanstown. 1915, after slavery, there were 54 churches. 54. And most of the religion was Baptist or Methodist. That's what the religions were. But it was 54. And now we've expanded so much. You hear people say the church is, you hear people say the church is over 150 years, 100 years old. It's not that the building is over 100 years old. It's because the congregation is over 150 years old. Because what I say, it's about the people. It's not necessarily about things. Just because somebody go burn your building down, don't mean they can burn your church down. It does not mean that. And Freemanstown has had a lot of unanswered fires with churches, homes, all type of things to get people out of there. The mayor of the city of Houston said that Freemanstown was a coffin, was like a coffin. And then another one said that, you know what, they can go and stay in any of them shacks in 3rd and 5th Ward. And they condemned the eastern part of Freemanstown. The Pilgrim Building, built in 1926, was one of the most beautiful, the most brilliant buildings built by African Americans for African Americans. And guess what? That building is no longer here. That building was torn down in 1965. I wonder why. That's the side that they condemned. You know where City Hall is? People of color was down there. That was all part of Freemanstown. It was taken. They condemned that part to take it to build what they wanted to build with it. And now we allowed them to do that then, and now they're coming for the whole thing. It's very little left. Okay? That's the Nixon house I was telling you about, the one I was saying. But I learned a very valuable lesson by photographing the Nixon house. I'm from the South, and so there's all kind of houses. Houses look like that, and I'm gonna tell you, I was ashamed. I was ashamed to go to my family house that looked like that. And a lot of us were, a lot of us are. Y'all have lived through civil rights and all of that. And they were pulling up the linoleum off the floor and the wallpaper off the walls. And I never understood that. But the reason why there's so many piles of linoleum on the floor was to keep the air from the floor coming up into the house, to keep the house warm. The reason why they have so much wallpaper on the walls was to seal the walls to keep the air from coming in, trying to keep warm. And I understood that. And then here is the big thing. Our people, our ancestors didn't mean for us to live like that. They meant for us to survive. Their thing was to survive so that we can be more and we can be great. When I told you about the prayers being answered from the grave, that's not their prayer. And that's not the answer. So they're not meaning for us to stay in those places looking like that. If you're going to stay there, you got to make it something that's worthy of what they put themselves and sacrifice themselves for. Okay? That's just really the truth. And so that's J. Vance Lewis. So you see some of the houses going through that's up there. And so that's my big thing. We were not meant to stay there. We are meant to make it better. we're not meant to give up our land, but that's where we failed. We thought that we were supposed to move out. We did what we were supposed to do, but we didn't take care of home and keep the land because the value is in the land. And we talk about freedom colonies, so I only look at structures between a certain time frame because the laws start changing. Freedom colonies is something that we built and designed for ourselves because this is the only way black people could be. Now, when we talk about neighborhoods, that's somebody came in and designed a house and different things and sold it to us. So it's different. Like a lot of places that are black communities are neighborhoods. They're not settlements. Okay? But Freemanstown is a settlement. And so I'm just so happy to be here. I think I covered. That school is the Gregory School, Gregory Institute. That school has the same historical landmark designation as the Alamo. Y'all don't know, nobody even know it, nobody even talk about it. Now, isn't that amazing? They can't do anything with that land unless it's according to whatever the parameters are for it. So I'm just happy to be here. See that skyline? That's what they want right there. That's it. Skyline. So I know some people said, okay, I'm gonna say one more thing and we'll close it up. So Camp Logan is my big pet peeve. It's because there's a lot of stories, even in the newspapers, that was published about Camp Logan that's not necessarily true. It's a story they want you to know. But one thing, when we came under martial law in the city of Houston, you know what they did to black people? They went in their houses, took their weapons, if they had weapons, took their weapons away from them, and they armed whites. They armed them and took the blacks' weapons away. One day, over 900 people left this community and gave their stuff up for a little of nothing because they couldn't take it, it wasn't safe anymore. They were terrorized, but guess what? They survived so that we can be here today.